1 minute, councillors. Good morning, councillors, and welcome to the City Planning, Economic Development and Environment Committee meeting of the 15th of February. I declare this meeting open at 9 a.m. and I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet and their elders past, present and emerging. I'd like to advise meeting attendees in this room that the meeting is being webcast and audio recorded, and I remind attendees to practice social distancing and take the necessary safety precautions. I don't have any leaves of absence today. I understand the Mayor is in the building. He'll be here as soon as he can be. Councillors, speak the devil, and he does appear. Councillors, with your indulgence, I'm going to shuffle around the sequence to allow one of the managers to get to another meeting. So I'll go straight to item 5.1 and then I'll continue with the agenda as planned otherwise. So item 5.1 is a development assessment report. It's a confidential report covering Appeal 11/2020, proposed food and drink outlet. Just let me skip forward to my confident. We have a whole heap of confidentials today, which means we're doing really important stuff, but it will mean that, unfortunately, the huge audience on YouTube is going to miss out on a bit of our conversation. Councillors, I now refer to item 5.1. The Development Assessment Manager, Mr. Stephen Ball, has come to the front. I note that item 5.1 is confidential and it's considered necessary to take the discussion of this report into a closed session, as the content of this report contains legal advice provided to Council regarding an ongoing legal matter. Do any councillors wish to move into closed session for this item? Thank you. Moved by Councillor Bradley, seconded by Councillor Stemp. Oh, we don't need a seconder to move out of confidential, but into. Okay, we've got new meeting code rules today as well, so if I bumble my way through, I apologise. All in favour, please show your hand. That has been carried unanimously with the exception of Councillor Bennon and Councillor Hall. How do you vote, Councillor Hall?
Against.
Councillor Bennon?
Against.
Thank you very much. Councillors, will now move into closed session and the live recording will stop, but audio recording will continue for record keeping purposes for Council's internal use. thumbs up. Excellent. Welcome back to the public audience. The councillors have had an in-depth debate in confidential session, and we've now returned. Do we have any? I understand that Councillor Stemp wants to make a public statement, and Councillor Bradley wishes to make a public statement. Is that right?
I will be saying something, but I'll do it in general business.
I think it's probably need to put to the vote.
So Councillor Stemp specifically requested to speak to the motion when we come out. So, and she's well aware of the confidentiality requirements, and as a divisional councillor, I'll give her that opportunity. Take it away, Councillor Stemp.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I just wanted to thank my community for their patience with regard to this appeal and in being provided with an update. As noted, unfortunately, sharing the legal advice this time would compromise Council's standing in the proceedings by making available the Council's prospects and legal strategy to other parties in the appeal. I'll ensure that I write to you as soon as the matter is finalised, providing you with a copy of the report and legal advice that is currently confidential, and provide you with a further update after the Council meeting on the 23rd of February.
Thank you, Councillor Stemp, and great work at doing your best to keep your community informed through the challenges of confidentiality. Councillors, there is a motion on the screen. Do I have someone who will move that motion for me? Thank you, Councillor Fraser. Would someone like to second that motion? Thank you, Councillor Murphy. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That is carried with 8 votes. I'll go through the councillors who did not vote. Mayor Power,
Abstained.
did you want to provide a reason for the minutes?
The reason why I abstained is because I believe the landscaping is not full enough to provide screening for the lights when they drive around. I believe that the residents will be affected by the lights, and for that reason I'm abstaining.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Bradley?
Against.
Thank you, Councillor Bradley. Councillor Lane?
Against.
Thank you, Councillor Lane. Who else was a vote against? Councillor Stemp?
Against.
And Councillor Wilcox?
Against.
Thank you very much, councillors. That motion is carried. That brings us to the end of the Development Assessment Manager's reports. Is there any general business?
Yes.
Councillor Bradley.
Thank you, through the chair. Stephen, can I just ask a question, please? Is development allowed in every area of the city? Can you just explain it to councillors where development can happen, where it can't happen?
Through the chair, where development is allowed to occur within the city is informed by council's planning scheme.
Right.
So as you'd be aware, councillor, we're moving towards a 2025 planning scheme. So it's a great opportunity for members of the public to engage with the planning process through the program of consultation that we've got, which sits above the legislative requirements, and that will enable the community to influence what forms of development will occur across the city.
Thank you for that. And so I've been through the process before, and I know how it all works. But for the general public, they can actually, you know, if they don't want a childcare somewhere, or if they don't want a service station somewhere, or whatever their rationale is, they can actually put in submissions to this planning scheme. Is that correct?
Through the chair, that is correct. If any of the members of the public have any concerns with forms of development across the city, it's an excellent opportunity for them to have a conversation with any of our planning staff that are available during that period, and they can help them to understand what can occur in the city at the moment and potentially what things that they may be able to ask to change within the scheme to for that outcome to be achieved.
Thank you. And the final question, if I may, the Springwood local plan, where does that sit?
Through the chair, I might have to defer to my director, as that is possibly a question for the Economic Development and Strategy Manager.
Yeah, through the chair, the Springwood local plan has been on hold for some years, and the M1 widening works that TMR is pursuing has sort of created some extra uncertainty for us. The intent, as I believe it's been explained to you previously, is that we're going to roll the new version of the Springwood Town Centre, or not the Springwood local plan, into the 2025 scheme. So that will form part of the consultation with the community leading up to that plan, and then there'll be influence in that regard.
And they can put in submissions then.
Absolutely, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bradley. Stephen, do you have any general business for us?
No, I don't.
No further councillors have general business for Stephen? Oh, Councillor Kransky.
We just spoke a moment ago about ensuring that we close the loop when we look at planning scheme amendments and so on. And just independently of that, I just wanted to confirm that the issues of service stations with food and drink outlets, that applications are coming through, and we have seen a number of them over the past term, and not as many this term. But there does seem to be a loophole with regard to applications on land that's not designated specifically for that purpose. Like we're talking about rural residential and so on. I just wanted to know that we would be looking at that as part of our planning scheme amendments, so that consideration will be given to those kinds of applications.
Through the chair, we're always keeping an eye on what's happening through the court processes and the outcomes of things like appeals in order to inform the way that we evolve the planning scheme to best address those types of issues. Yes.
I just bring it up, Stephen, because Councillor Bannon, I'm sure, has been inundated with inquiries for food and drink outlets along Camp Cabell Road, as I have along Waterford Tambourine Road, and on the corner of those roads, and there's quite a bit of land banking there. But at the end of the day, the applications are coming through on land that's not designated. It requires a change of designation from rural residential, and somehow these things seem to happen when we have enough will behind it by the applicant. So I'd just like to make sure that we do give some due diligence to investigating that ahead of the new planning scheme.
Thank you, Councillor Kransky, noting that while Stephen's team assesses development, he doesn't build the planning scheme. That's Dave Radich. So we'll give him that feedback as well, but it's good feedback.
Thank you.
Councillor Mayor Power, sorry.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Chair. Stephen, you look after, you're in charge of the officers who control the building works.
Through the chair, the building certification process is privatised, so I look after the team that investigates building works in the city where complaints are made against not having approvals.
That's what I'm looking at.
Okay.
Okay, so in regards to the construction of houses, I believe building cannot start until a reasonable hour during the week. That's about 7 o'clock. Is that correct?
Through the chair, I understand that it is 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. are the hours, but I will confirm whether there's been any changes to that.
Okay. In regard to concrete pouring, where is that seen as? I would imagine if they're on site, it would be irrelevant what they're actually doing, but they would not be able to start until the designated time.
That's correct. So once they begin using the pump, they'll be using a regulated device, which is something that cannot occur outside of those hours that I've just described.
Okay. So our officers will be regulating that so that the officers can't start before the time, even though they're pouring concrete.
Through the chair, as you might recall from my previous presentation, at the moment that's dealt with through the local laws, through the City Standards and Animal Care branch, and there's a proposed service enhancement that seeks to bring that into the Development Assessment branch so that we can address those issues on those, particularly those domestic house
I've had a
sites.
complaint that's contradictory to your statement there, so I will take that offline later. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Power. My experience was you could be on site from 6, but you can't make noise until 7. So that's your regulated device, partial. But it's been a while since I've been on the tools, Mr Mayor, so I could be wrong. Councillor Lane.
Thanks very much. Do you want the floor? Okay. A quick question. So we've got a lot of infill happening in my division at the moment, and one of the things that we've noticed is that houses are having granny flats or annexes built out the back, and there doesn't seem to be any need for those builders when they close off the road to actually have traffic management control systems in place. Now, I know that council's very on the ball when it comes to that because we get billed so much against our local infrastructure program funding for traffic control. Is there anything built into the requirements when they're doing building on site to have traffic management?
Through the chair, because the roads are actually within council's responsibility, they should get a permit for the work. So I will say that some of the councils may be aware the Roads Infrastructure Planning Branch is responsible for the road closure permits. Once again, there is a service enhancement coming up this round in relation to some feedback, asking for the Development Assessment Branch to look after the road closure permits associated with development sites. But any further questions around that, you'd need to ask the Roads Infrastructure Planning Manager around the detail about how they manage those particular matters at the moment.
Thanks very much. So when an application comes through, do you send it off to RIP to assess whether or not it needs traffic management?
Through the chair, there are conditions opposed as part of the larger development sites that require them to make an application for, reminding them of the obligation to make an application for a road closure permit as part of their traffic management plan. But if we're talking about individual house sites, because you're talking about secondary dwellings and extensions, the building certifier applies conditions to those approvals. And as I was saying before, regardless of the approval, the need to get a road closure permit to do something on council land is a requirement that isn't required to be conditioned by the approval. So, as I was saying before, once again, how that process is managed, that you'd need to ask the Roads Infrastructure Planning Manager around that at this point in time, how that is managed.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Lane. Any further general business for the manager? No? Excellent. Please go back to work, Stephen. Thank you. We'll now move back to the agenda as it's laid out in your reports, councillors, to item 4.1, which is the changing of the Local Government Infrastructure Plan Review, LGIP V2, into an interim amendment, LGIP V1.3. I now refer to item 4.1 and call for the Economic Development and Strategy Manager, Mr. David Radich, to please enter discussions. I trust that he's just waiting with bated breath outside the door. Before we open any discussions on this item, do any councillors have any conflicts of interest they would like to declare? There being none, we'll just wait for the manager. Would you like some elevator music? Do. No? Too soon? Welcome, Christian and Ella, to the discussion. Are you going to present the report, Christian? Excellent. Thank you very much. I'll hand over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay. Thank you. This report seeks to do two things: repeal an old resolution and put forward a new one. On page 3, you can see the reasons for the change of approach. We kicked off an LGIP review prior to deciding to start the new planning scheme. A new planning scheme actually also includes an LGIP review, and we don't have time to do 2 reviews before 2025. The solution to this is to change the first review to an interim amendment and allow the broader review to be carried out as part of the development of the new planning scheme. This way, the current LGIP can be kept up to date and the timeframe for the new scheme is not jeopardised. Councillors may recall seeing an email about repealing the old resolution last week. We received some advice from the government branch, and apparently there's some requirements in the local government regulations that require us to formally notify the councillors prior to today's committee meeting. So that's the background to that email, I think, that went out on Thursday. Thank you. Happy to take questions.
Thank you very much, Christian. Are there any questions for the program leader? There being none, is someone happy to move the report? Thank you, Councillor Stemp. So would someone like to second it? Thank you, Councillor Bennett. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That is carried unanimously. Must have been an excellent presentation, Christian. Don't even know why we have a manager. Oh, here he comes. Councillors, that is the end of item 4.1. We'll now move on to item 4.2, which is a confidential report, the Logan Village to Yarra Bilba Rail Trail budget. Before we open discussions on this item, do any councillors Any councillors have any conflicts of interest they'd like to declare? There being none, I note that item 4.2 is confidential because it is considered necessary to take the discussion of this report into a closed session as the information in the confidential report relates to discussions on council's budget. Do any councillors wish to move into closed session for this item? Councillor Bradley has moved. Would someone like to second that motion? Councillor Russell has seconded. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That has been carried unanimously with the exception of Councillor Lane,
Against.
Councillor Hall,
Against.
Councillor Bennon.
Against.
Thank you very much, councillors. The motion has been carried and we'll now move into confidential session. Thank you very much and welcome back to members of the public who are watching us today. We're now prepared to vote on the motion that is on the screen as soon as the internet stops arguing with our awesome meetings team. Councillor Karansky would like to move this motion when we see it. She's very excited and I can't blame her. Please stand by. Jeez, it's almost as if eScribe is like a... Thank you. Councillors, you have a motion on the screen that Councillor Karansky has moved. Would someone like to second that? Councillor Bannon has seconded that motion. All those in favour, please raise your hands. That has been carried unanimously. Thank you very much, councillors. We will now move on to item 4.3, which is a confidential report called the Reducing Infrastructure Charges for Tourist Parks and Nature-Based Tourism. Before we open discussion on this item, do any councillors have a conflict of interest they'd like to declare? There being none, I note it's considered necessary to take the discussion of this report into a closed session as the information in the confidential report relates to discussions of council's budget. Do any councillors wish to move into closed session for this item, noting that you don't have to if you're ready to vote? Councillor Karansky has moved. Councillor Bradley has seconded. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That has been carried unanimously with the exception of Councillor Lane. Against. Councillor Hall.
Against.
And Councillor Bannon.
Against.
Thank you very much, councillors. That has been carried. We're now moved into closed session and I'll wait for the recording to... Please let me, I don't need this. Please let me know when we've got the recording back on. Welcome back to members of the public. Yes. Oh, sorry. And Mr. Mayor was against it as well. Or would you like to
I'll be
abstain?
against it.
Coming out of confidential, mate. Sorry, can I just be clear that the Mayor and Councillor Lane do want to vote to come out of confidential for the record, that they're not resisting coming into the public realm, which is fantastic news for transparency and accountability all round. Councillors, there is a motion on the board. Thank you for your in-depth debate. Do I have someone who'd like to move this motion? Thank you, Councillor Kransky, seconded by Councillor Bradley. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That is carried unanimously with the exception of Councillor Mayor Power. How do you vote?
I'll be against.
And Councillor Lane?
Still against, thank you.
Thank you very much for clarifying that. Councillors, that brings us to the end of the Economic Development and Strategy Manager's reports. Do you have any general business for Dave? Yes, Councillor Bradley?
Thank you, through the chair. I raised before with the director about the Springwood local plan going out into the planning scheme. I'm curious at what point in time that will, the community can actually have their say. I would like to engage with those people to give them an opportunity. Obviously, it created a lot of interest. It has created a lot of interest previously. So, can I just please flag with you that I would like to engage with the landowners, particularly when that time comes.
Through the chair, not a problem. I can get you some information, Councillor Bradley, on timeframes and some material that you can talk to your community about.
Thank you, Dave. Any further GB for the manager? Dave, do you have any GB for us? No? Thank you very much. We will now move on to item, and that brings us to the end of, Michael, as the manager for Health, Environment and Waste, Mr. Asnikar, do you have any general business for us? Do you have no reports because you're so busy at the moment? No? Councillors, do you have any general business for Michael? He's going to remain for the next stage of the... Thank you, Councillor Bennett. Take it away.
Just a thank you, mate. I know you've gone through some stuff with your personal life, but you've managed to keep above and beyond everything anyway. I feel guilty ringing you sometimes, but it's only because you did the job that fast. I don't know if I go to you, it gets done just as fast. It's amazing how you've still, when the correspondence, you keep me updated, you're first class.
Great work, mate. Keep it up. No further general business or unabashed praise for Michael? No? Good. Excellent. Stay in the room, Michael, because we'll need you for the upcoming reports. Councillors, that brings us to the end of the strategy and sustainability reports. Do you have any general business for us, Mr. Director? Councillors, do you have any general business for the Director? No. We'll now move into item 6.1 with the Director of Innovation and City Transformation, which is the 2022 to 2024 Local Government Grants and Subsidies Program. The opportunity for money for projects is always an uncontroversial and easy matter to manage, but we will have to do it in confidential. While we wait for the staff to come in, I'll now refer to item 6.1. The Director for Innovation and City Transformation, Dr. Scott Burke, will enter discussions. Before we open discussions, do any councillors have any conflicts of interest they'd like to declare? There being none, I note that item 6.1 is confidential as it's necessary to take the discussion of this report into a closed session, as a confidential attachment contains information relating to projects to be funded at the discretion of the state and local government's budgets. Do any councillors wish to move into confidential for this discussion? Thank you, Councillor Bradley, seconded by Councillor Kransky. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That is carried unanimously with the exception of Councillor Lane.
Against.
Councillor Hall.
Against.
I'm pretty sure Councillor Bennett backed this one in. You put your hand up. No. Thank you very much. Noting that Councillor Wilcox was absent for the vote. Councillors, will now move into confidential session. I'll just wait for the public streaming to be closed. Well done. Welcome back to members of the public. We have a motion on the screen that does not include the tabling. Do I do that separately? Here we go. Before we go to the decision, I'll just now move a motion that I'll call on someone to move the motion for me, that the confidential attachment to the confidential report, as now displayed on the screen, you got that one? Yep. That the confidential attachment associated with this report be tabled and that it be released from confidential at the discretion of the Director of Innovation and City Transformation. Can someone move that for me, please? Thank you, Councillor Stemp, seconded by Councillor Fraser. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That's just the tabling of the document. Thank you. Councillor, unanimous except for Councillor Bradley? Against. And Councillor Stemp? Yes, you're in favour? So just Councillor Bradley voted against the tabling of the document. And then the next motion is the decision that was made that was discussed and debated in confidential. The motion is on the screen. Would someone please move that motion for me? Councillor Fraser, seconded by Councillor Bennon. All those in favour, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That is carried with the exception of Councillor Bradley.
I would like it recorded on council system, please, that I have raised previously about the equity. I can't even say the word. The equity. I can't even say it. Sorry. Yeah,
Equity,
across the city, and how this process has been flawed. And I will be asking for a general business item after this.
How do you vote though? Against?
I will be voting against, yes.
Thank you, Councillor Bradley. Councillor Kerensky.
Thank you. I would like to abstain, and I'd like to offer a rationale if I could,
Yes, please. I love that.
The reason I'm abstaining is because I don't think that the projects that got up weren't great projects, and I do think that they are deserving of being supported, but I cannot support the process that sat behind those projects being presented and the way councillors arrived at that decision today. So it's my hope that we will review those processes so we can streamline this better in future.
So can I summarise that as saying you believe the projects are good projects, but you're unhappy with the process and the way councillors made the decision, and you'd like a better process in future?
I think if there'd been a different process, you wouldn't have arrived at the same conclusions. So yes, you can summarise in that.
Yep.
Yes.
No problems. You're just going to get off the recording later. Excellent. And who else didn't? Councillor Wilcox.
I will vote against because I don't believe they are a priority infrastructure project, and I don't believe that they sit well with the local priorities sitting with the CIP.
Thank you, Councillor Wilcox. Councillors, that brings us to, no, we've got one more. Thank you very much for your patience. Yes?
Is it possible to raise a general business item here?
You can at the end of the reports. There's still one more report to go. We've got a late report. The late report is, bear with me while I bring back. So the late report is item 8.1, which is thank you to all the staff who provided their advice. Your time is greatly appreciated. 8.1, which is the exemption from inviting tenders for US International Market Access Program. Councillors, this item is considered confidential. Before I explain why, do any councillors have a conflict of interest they'd like to declare? There being none, it's considered necessary to take this discussion of this report into closed session as its contents of the report are commercial in confidence. Do any councillors wish to move into closed session, noting that you don't have to if you're ready to move and vote on the motion now? As no one's ready to move into closed session, I trust that you're ready to vote. Would someone like to move the motion on the screen? Thank you, Mayor Power, seconded by Councillor Stemp. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That has been carried unanimously with the exception of Councillor Hermeyer.
Against.
Councillor Wilcox.
I'll abstain because I haven't even seen this late report.
And Councillor Murphy.
Yeah, I abstain as well because I haven't got the report.
All good. Thank you very much, councillors. That brings us to the end of the Innovation and City Transformation reports. Councillor Bradley, I believe you have general business, and so does the Mayor. No?
Yeah, I'd
Yep.
like to ask for a report, and I'm not sure who the appropriate person is to write the report, so I'll leave that part blank. But this is in relation to strategically helicopter view, having worked out priorities, criteria for grant funding across the whole city. Yeah, so I just would like to have some sort of criteria, some sort of strategic report that would identify the whole city. Because obviously that, like I said, that previous report, 2 reports ago, there was a flaw there, and that was identified in the confidential component, so I cannot speak publicly about that. But projects were not considered, and officers actually expressed they would have met the criteria.
So, Councillor Bradley, just working on your general business motion, we could either refer that to the Director of Innovation and City Transformation if it's specifically about how grants get assessed.
Yeah.
But if you think it's more about how the organisation as a whole
Yeah,
operates,
I think
it could
that-
be to the Office of the CEO.
I think so.
Is that what your preference
That
would
is
be?
my preference, probably.
No worries. So that the Office of the Chief Executive Officer be requested to prepare a report to a future Planning, Economic Development, Environment Committee meeting, reviewing the process of the assessment, reviewing the process of preparing reports for consideration in relation to grants by the committee. I'm happy for people to make that wording better. I literally just bubbled that out while I was thinking about it. We'll just put it on the screen so councillors can read it, provide feedback. Councillor, you're happy to second it. Mayor Power, you'd like to add to it? Yep, yes, please.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Look, I think when you look at the roles of the council officers, obviously when you've got a report like this, there's a lot of emphasis from the councillors to have solid advice. In other words, a report that's based on something. It's stated in here it's a priority, infrastructure. Then really we need a report based on why things are a priority. And I think the number one issue in the city is priority is should be based on the need for something, not on whether or not it is in the process of being a project that we've already planned or whatever. There should be a basis of that. It's a priority because there's a need, council need. It's to be, there's a need for a certain project, and based on the theories of why. I'm a little bit frustrated in the report because I don't think that's been addressed, and I'm disappointed that we've sort of gone away from the fundamentals of a council report in that it's a need basis. And I think that should be reflected in that request for a better report.
So how would you like that?
Well, I would like to obviously have the officers in their report indicate what need, why particular projects are needed. Is, you know, there's got to be, see, when you've got a report that comes up and you've put all these projects in front of all the councillors, then it's up to us to decide with no basis of need. And I think that's a major flaw in the report because it's fundamental for our decision-making process. I think we're just lacking there in information coming forward to the councillors. Otherwise, we're going to have the issues that we've had in the past, and we're looking for direction there from the officers, and I think that's needed in the report.
I understand your sentiment. What would you like me to add to that motion to make sure it reflects the specifics here? So we've got that review the process of preparing reports for consideration in relation to grants.
So what I think,
I'll
let that go up,
Yeah,
but I'll have a talk to the CEO about that fundamental part of the report being in there, because, you know, how many times have we as a council, you know, get this money all of a sudden and it's a big fight?
Yeah.
There should be a priority-based list on priorities so that we can analyse, you know, where the priorities are. We're sort of like left to ourselves to come up with a decision, and the parameters are just too broad. And fundamentally, we can't agree on something. You know, we're all over the place. We need a lot more evidence-based reporting for us to get, obviously, reduce the amount of discussion in here.
Yes, please.
And to give us a better feel on the direction of the council report. And there might be some disagreement, there might be some changes, but we're all over the place here.
I agree. It's very difficult. Like, as a chair, it's very difficult. And acknowledging that there are some priority lists in the city, but they only cover specific types of projects. So you might have a community infrastructure project being put against a streetscaping project being put against a parks or a roads project, and that's where we come a cropper. I've got Councillor Fraser and Councillor Lane. Please speak directly to the general business so we can get into Councillor Lane's committee, because she's got some cool stuff.
There's a typo up there that the office of the chief executive, no of, needed between there, and officer.
Thank
just
you very
pointing
much,
that out.
Councillor
It's been
Fraser.
driving me nuts.
Well spotted, mate. Gold star. Councillor Lane.
Thanks very much, you, Mr. Chair. You asked the Mayor to allocate on what he would add to the motion. I would put at the end of it that details the social, economic and infrastructure needs of the project.
Are you comfortable with that suggestion, Councillor Bradley? Is it your motion? It'll be on the screen in a second.
Yeah, so that's
The social, economic, and what was the other one?
Infrastructure
Infrastructure.
needs of the projects. The reason for that wording, Mr. Chair, is simply that councillors can easily identify what each one is and prioritises, and then we can actually ask questions based on the recommendations or those assessments.
So, councillors, you have a motion on the screen. Councillor Bradley, are you comfortable with what that says? Because it's
Can
your
I
motion.
speak to it, please?
Yes, please.
I suppose in my head, I would like some sort of criteria, and I do reflect what the Mayor has said about need. I think the criteria, reviewing the process of the criteria maybe, of preparing reports for consideration. So I'm not sure if you could add the word criteria in relation to grants that details.
I'm happy to add the word criteria.
Or details or assesses.
So the challenge is that in other grants where it's like where we get to where the funding is allocated to us, so we purely get discretion as a council, we have a criteria and councillors don't like the criteria. So, and generally the councillors whose projects are high do like the criteria, and the councillors' projects are low don't like the criteria. So the whole process, in my view, including informing the officers and making sure that they provide feedback to council, the whole thing needs a review. But if you just want to focus on the criteria, you can, but I think the criteria will be included in your original recommendation.
Okay. Can I just reflect? Like I said, there was stuff that was missed, not in that report, that could have been in the report. The officers actually said that in confidential. So I just want to somehow flag and make sure that those things don't happen in the future.
That's why I think the whole process needs to be considered rather than just the criteria, because if your project's on the list, it doesn't matter what the criteria is, you're not getting assessed. Does that make sense?
So it doesn't become a political, oh, I know that this is going to get support because the majority will support it.
Okay. I don't know how to avoid. I don't know how to avoid that in a voting sense, but I understand what you're trying to achieve. So you're comfortable with the whole process being reviewed, not just the criteria, and you're comfortable with the social, economic, and infrastructure needs being part of that? Do you want to add community?
Yeah, I think community as well.
Social, community, economic, infrastructure. Councillor Benham?
Any council can put a report up, so I'm not saying don't do the report, but this is to the director. Like you've seen the things that people didn't like and did like in the process. I don't do reports. I just find I was going to talk to staff. I find reports tie up staff and it takes a lot of time and it actually slows it down. I know the report's coming up anyway and that's every councillor's right, but like honestly, do you need, I'm just asking you, do you need a report or is just, you've acknowledged what's going on, you can come back and we can do it different next time?
Through the chair, as a result of the last two grant scheme processes, we've certainly been giving consideration to changing or making some changes to the process. Happy to take on board all of the feedback that councillors have provided today, have conversation with the CEO and ELT colleagues and put a proposal back to the chair for consideration of the committee to actually change the process to improve it, and we can look at the benefits for councillors, and then on the basis of council feedback we can implement those changes.
But through the chair, I'm not going to chop on Councillor Bradley at all, and some councillors like doing reports. They find that's the best way for them to do it. It's just, yeah, I don't like reports.
My own view is that from a diligence and a governance standpoint, reports are particularly important instruments. The difficulty is always going to be making those reports concise and to the point. And to the Mayor's query, you have 13 councillors. If you include the Mayor as a councillor, you often have 13 different points of view and perspectives on what constitutes an efficient and effective report. We do our very best on the basis of the processes that we've been running at council since I've been here, which is about 3 years, to deliver quality advice in relation to grant scheme recommendations to council, but there's always opportunities for improvement.
Thank you, Councillor Bennett, for that question. Councillor Bradley, you still want to move the motion on the screen, or
yes, I definitely do want to move the motion because this is all about transparency, which is what the Local Government Act is. That's how we operate, and yeah, happy to move it.
Would someone like to second that motion? Councillor Karansky, second that motion. All in favour, please raise your hand. That is carried unanimously with the exception of Councillor Hall.
Against.
And Councillor Bennett.
Against.
Thank you very much, councillors, noting the absence of Councillor Murphy. Councillors, that brings us to the end of the agenda. Dr. Scott, do you have any general business for us? Is there any further general business for Dr. Scott? There being none, thank you very much. The meeting is closed at 12:07. The City Infrastructure Committee meeting will start at 12:17.
Well, are we going to have a lunch break?
It's not how the system works.
Sorry?
It's not how it works. They're separated by 10 minutes.